Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hey everybody, John Peterson here, and I've got a little quick tip for you today regarding vignettes, adding a vignette to your image. This is something I do for every image that I process. I will add a vignette. The reason I do that is twofold. Number one, it helps me draw and point the viewer to where I want them to look by making the area inside the vignette where my subject is, making that brighter than darker areas. Our eyes are always drawn to the brightest part of the image, and so by having darker borders and a brighter center, it helps people focus on my subject and pay attention to where I want them to look. And then the second reason I always do this is because it adds a little bit of depth and dimension into the photograph. As you know, we're photographing three-dimensional subjects here on a two-dimensional medium. So anything I can do to add depth and dimension is beneficial in my eyes. And so every single photograph gets a vignette. And no two vignettes are the same for me. A lot depends on the scene, where the subject is positioned, what the tonality of the image is. It all differs image by image. So, it's just something that I do as the final step in my processing. Most of the time I add vignettes. I work a lot in Photoshop, and I add my vignettes in Photoshop, where I have some actions and some different ways to add vignettes. But since a lot of you all use Lightroom as your primary editing tool, I thought I'd show you a couple of quick tips for creating a vignette in Lightroom. So I got 3 images to sort of highlight this for you. When you're in the Develop tab of Lightroom, if you scroll down towards the bottom, hopefully you've all seen this, there is this post-crop vignetting slider. I'll set this back to 0. This is how the image looks. And if I slide this to the left, it darkens the edges, and if I slide it to the right, it brightens the edges. So the quick and easy way to do this is to just grab this slider and move it to the left. What I want to do is darken the borders of this and have people really focused on the central part of this image. Right in here is where I want them to look. So I will darken this to a point where I like the look. It's really an aesthetic assessment for me, where I like the look. I don't want to block out the shadows too much and make them absolutely black and too dark, but I want to minimize the visual importance of the borders of this shot and have people really just focus right here in the middle of the scene. Now, if I took this to an extreme, right, you could do that from an artistic perspective, but I like to have my vignettes be subtle and not noticeable, but yet still have a beneficial effect in the shot. So that's a real easy way to do that. This next image, again, it's a coastal shot, right? The most important parts of this shot are this crack running right up the middle, out to the ocean, out to the sun. So I can add just a quick little vignette into the side of this to darken the sides. There's the extreme of this, which I don't like. But I will add just maybe -12 onto this, and what it does is that it darkens just enough, the bottom of the foreground here, and then the upper left and right corners, to really focus people and keep them right here along the center of this shot, which is where I want them to look. The one thing you've probably noticed with the vignette slider in Lightroom is that it really adds this vignette from the center of the physical picture, not where your subject is, but from the physical center of the image. It'll vignette around the left and right and top and bottom. What if your subject is not in the middle of the frame? What do you do then? Here's a lighthouse on the Oregon coast up in Newport. It's the Aquina Head Lighthouse. And notice that it's offset. So if I was to add a vignette to this, the vignette is not centered around the subject. And ideally, that's what I want to have happen. I want the vignette, I want the brightest part centered on the subject. So what do? Well, this is the case where we utilize our masking tools. So if you come up into the mask tool in Lightroom and you go to, actually, let me get rid of this. Check. So if you come up to the mask tool in Lightroom and you select radial gradient, and then you just draw roughly the size and shape that you want on the screen, I can position this right over the top of my subject. For me in this shot, I might want a little bit of a tilt. So you can see that the effect is going to go right in the middle of this circle. But I don't want to darken this. I want to darken the outside around the circle. So what I need to do is invert the mask. So there's a little button over here on the right. Click invert. Notice the rest of the scene is now going to be affected by whatever changes I make. And we don't have a vignette slider when we're using the mask tool. So what I use is the exposure slider. And if I bring the exposure down just a little bit, you can see how I now have, I went from that to that, just a slight gradient. You know, with the exposure tool, you have to be a little bit careful, because what'll happen is it'll start to look like you have a definite circle or a spotlight on your subject. This doesn't feather as much as, let's say, the vignette tool does. You know, you can expand this out a little bit if you want. This is 100% strength, and then it gradually feathers out to here. You know, you can have more feather if you want. But my biggest recommendation is to go easy and light on the exposure tool. I want my vignettes to be on the scene, as I said before, but not be noticeable. So there's a couple quick tips for you. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it. Don't forget that radial tool, really powerful tool in Lightroom. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you saw, subscribe, stay tuned for more videos. Have a great day. Bye-bye.